Yeah, welcome to the second class. Today there will be more to do for you. So I hope you remember all your opinions about the Internet of Things from the last time, and we will try building on that today. So I will start with a small exercise for you, so you have to do some research here today. We will think about buses, because we need to communicate somewhere in the Internet of Things. And you might have seen yesterday already that the communication with the gateway, of course, is via classic networks. But if we go lower level, we have different types of communication. And they are so-called hardware buses. And the most common buses we will actually see in our class will be RS-232. Do anybody knows RS-232? Yeah, so this is normal serial communication. You might have done this before. Who has heard about I2C? Oh, very good. SPI? One wire? Anybody? Yeah. What did you do with one wire?
I read temperature values from.
Oh, that's what we will do too. Good. So I will actually put you in groups, and so each group will research one of these protocols. So basically, just read the Wikipedia page of the bus I will assign to you, and then you will exchange with the other people who read the same thing as you. So I will basically count you through 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, and then you will mix up and you will compare notes. Then we will present. We'll basically get apart, and then we'll present to each other so that everybody knows everything in the end. So we'll kind of do two mixing things here, and then represent, and then everybody of you knows about all the 4 buses. So I will just count you through now, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you know what you have to do. So that means group 1 needs to figure out how does RS-232 work. Yeah, so you look about how the protocol works, how many wires you need, how fast it is, find some examples where it is actually used, how long it can be. That's actually what we're really interested in, kind of speed, length, and also find some examples how it's actually wired up. Group 2, I2C, group 3, SPI, and group 4, one wire. And what you write down now, so you must take notes, goes into the lecture notes. Okay, so kind of if you can stay all there if you want, or kind of move to a more comfortable position. I will do something now myself, so thank you for all your work. So now you will see me work again, but don't worry, you have another task for later today too. So in principle, everybody should know about these 4 buses, but don't worry, there will be also some hands-on later, and you will play with them. So we're coming to one of my other favorite topics. So of course, it's not all about hardware. There's also design and writing software. And you have probably done a little bit of software engineering somewhere in your studies so far. And I'm kind of the advocate of a paradigm of how we develop, which is very example and stories based. You have already seen that I'm if you find a lot of examples. And in the way I teach software development or product development is making you think about the design and about examples how to use it. And so we call that in the software development jargon stories. So I advocate for story-driven modeling, for actually designing with stories. And so we want to use this methodology also for designing our projects here in the class. But of course you have to know what this is all about, so I will give you a little bit of a primer here how to do this, and then in the last part of the class you will start actually thinking about such a project and you can try it out. So we talk about stories, examples, or scenarios and kind of mean the same thing. So because story-driven modeling comes basically from movie production. And you might have seen or you might have done something. If you make a theater play or a movie, you make a storyboard. So you make a lot of little screenshots or kind of scene shots and say who is where and what is happening at the specific position. But you basically freeze some moments in time and then you describe what's happening there and to make it step by step what's going on there. So that's why we talk about this story-driven stuff here. The nice thing is, and you probably can see it already, these examples, or giving examples this way, directly translates into tests. So you can actually, if you do test-driven development, you can basically code one of these stories directly as a test of a program. So story-driven modeling is very similar to test-driven programming. And the nice thing is, as a software engineer, you can also kind of easily derive out of these descriptions and stories some architecture artifacts. So we can actually derive object diagrams directly from it, which can help in communicating in your team better. We don't need this necessarily, but you can already see if we wire kind of components together, it's a little bit like object diagrams because we have kind of the nodes and then we connect it to devices. So that might be a very natural way here how we can draw our system or kind of think about the architecture of the system we built. So it's very agile, so it allows you to communicate a lot. So I want you to talk and iterate a lot. As I said, I want you to make errors and then learn from your errors and kind of make a new iteration of your project. So doing it story-driven actually helps because you can do an instant verification all the time. So if you see an error, you see the error very early and then you can address it and make a better version of it. And sometimes you also don't really know what exactly you want. So I think a lot of new software projects, you might have experienced that yourself, is you have a rough idea in the beginning what you want to do, but only when you actually start using it with your customers, you figure out what it is really what you want to design. So you learn there's a kind of giving and taking in the whole product cycle, in the product development process, because you might have to learn from your customer what they really want. You might build a great temperature controller, and but you put in some features the customer actually doesn't need, and you see, oh, it's just really is a very simple temperature control my customer needs, and I have to actually spend more time in the user interface than in the technology I want to sell him. So that is something which is also facilitated doing a product development process in a software-driven way. So you will see all these things about extreme programming and so coming back, and agile programming coming back here in my class again and again. So what is the story or a scenario? So the last time I taught home and building automation, so I also did something in this regard, and because they were master students, they should all know how to design good projects. And so I asked them to do it and come up with some ideas for their projects in the home and building automation class. And so the students' final scenario was called Big House, Airbnb, Smart Lock, and More Automation. And wasn't so happy about that one. But of course I had to be encouraging and say, that's a really good idea. But what do you want to do? Exactly. So there's something with the smart lock and some automation going on here, but you have to be more specific. If you want to actually have a case to test it on, you have to be more specific, have more, there needs to be something more in between there so that I get really an idea and know what you want to implement. Because you can't design it based on this very abstract term. You can also not turn it into a test. Okay. Then I got the students to actually give a little bit more thought to this process, and then the next story was like this. So a landlord has a house with multiple bedrooms and offers these rooms on Airbnb. Each room is supposed to have a smart lock, air conditioning control, temperature sensor, and an automated media system. This should all be controllable via phone. And you will already think now, oh, that's quite good already, so we could build something based on this input. So there's some requirements we can actually take from there. And yeah, so this is what we call use case. Yeah, so that but it's not a story yet. Because a story is something like this. And I do something with a...
What's an HVAC? Or HABA?
It's humidity, ventilation, air conditioning. So anything what has to do with temperature and humidity and kind of air exchange control in the house. I skipped a little bit over it because that's more home and building automation than Internet of Things. But yeah, you will stumble over this abbreviation often. So if you just type in HVAC, I think you find a lot of stuff around that. So a good story should be like this. So you have a title, so Airbnb, home automation, smart lock, noise, temperature scenario. And you have actually stakeholders. Yeah, so an example stakeholders. So in this case, we have the landlord, Carly, and we have the two tenants, Bob and Eddie. So, and then we have a specific story which allows you to test our system. And so this goes like this. Carly has a house in Linz, Austria, with 4 bedrooms and rents out 3 on Airbnb. He is currently on a small hiking trip in the forest nearby Linz. It is summer, and the outside temperature is around 30 degrees Celsius. Eddie stays already in his room and is binge-watching Game of Thrones. Carly's cell phone rings. It's his new tenant, Bob, who just arrived to his house and wants to enter. However, the main door is locked. Carly opens his house management app and activates Bob's profile. Bob logs into Carly's public Airbnb Wi-Fi as he doesn't have a data plan in Austria using previously exchanged credentials. He opens the Carly's house app, Carly made him download earlier, and presses the open main entrance door button, which unlocks it. Bob can now enter. Bob finds his private bedroom, which has actually the number 3 written on it. It is also locked. He presses the unlock room button in the application. The bedroom door opens and Bob can enter the room. Bob presses the media button, which starts the TV and displays the Kodi Media Center main screen. Using a built-in remote, Bob selects a YouTube documentation on home automation. When the movie starts, the light in the room is dimmed. An hour later, Bob feels tired and goes to bed. Using the app, he switches off the TV and all lights. There are buttons for single lights or one for interacting with all lights. Bob is very tired from traveling and falls asleep. As it's hot outside, Bob's room temperature reaches 22 degrees, triggering the air conditioning unit to switch on to bring the room back down to 21. Later, Carly comes back home, enters his house, and goes to his private rooms, unlocking main entrance and private quarters with his app. On one wall, he has LED strips showing the temperature and noise levels in each of his tenants' rooms. 2 LEDs are green, the LED of Eddie's room is red. Carly goes to Eddie's room, knocks at the door, and asks Eddie to lower the volume as it is after midnight. Eddie complies using the app, and Carly goes back to his quarters. All starters LEDs are green now. So there are several parts in there, you see. But it's kind of a whole story and a whole walkthrough which you could use to present something. So the nice thing, if you have such a story, you can actually use it for pitching. So that's what you usually, if you watch some weird Shark Tank shows, or you look where people actually pitch their products, they usually kind of have some kind of story in the back where they show a small part explaining and showing off their product they're actually pitching. The nice thing is also, not everything of this needs to work. So you can actually, if you have a story, you can use it to pitch your product, even if some things don't go wrong. So basically, we want, in the end, for our final projects, we want that each group of you has some kind of story like this and uses this as a guideline for presenting and making a tiny video about your final project. So that's kind of the end goal of this class. We want to have a big Internet of Things project, which can be described that way, and you will use such a story to verify that you have fulfilled most of the stuff. And if some stuff doesn't work, you will actually explain that and say, okay, this has to still be implemented, but it still fits into the whole story. So I want you have a narrative for your whole project to do that. And you can do tons of things based on that. We don't have to do all that, But so I teach a class on story-driven modeling, or if you're interested, buy my book and kind of check it out. Then you can actually go there and derive object diagrams and later class diagrams from this. So it's actually even nice not only to plan your project, but to get the initial architecture of your software, right? There's one thing, when you do this design based by stories and then start actually executing it, independent if you need to program it or if you do design with hardware, you want to analyze your own text for the nouns, because the nouns are usually either the objects you have to later model in your software, or these nouns are the hardware pieces you actually need, or it might be the stakeholders and props, so you have to brief who have to present this. Yeah? So really pay attention of the nouns and then the verbs, how these things are connecting. And you can really just go through the story, look at them, and then make a plan out of this, what has to be implemented and what has to be connected here. It sounds like magic, it's a little bit like magic, but I think we're not doing not enough concrete things. So I want you to think a little bit more concrete and in examples, and I promise you we'll get a better design. So much from my side. So now I want you to try this out. I want you to actually pick one of these very abstract scenarios and give it some of this content I have before. So I want you really to brainstorm and come up with a nice story just as an exercise here. So don't limit yourself. Be very creative and add way too much details. Yeah? So we want to actually over-detail it here at the time, because I want to take your fear away of giving too many details. You can still take them away later. So I have for you as a choice, building home gateways. I have for you a choice, you build building a middle school emergency remote for schools against students being robbed in school. So some kind of dangerous areas where that can happen. Or you want to actually build the infrastructure for recording the current wind and temperature data all over Upper Austria to allow distance for wind farm management. Yeah? So you have basically an energy company which comes to you and wants to put up windmills everywhere to generate energy, but they have to know a lot of weather data and they want to generate this weather data locally, so you have to work on that. I give you 1 minute kind of in your mini teams you have here in class, so you might find 4 or 5 people to work together, and just think 1 minute which one of the 3 you want to do. I don't assign that, you want to pick one of these where you have already an idea, and then I give you 10 minutes to come up, or 10-15 minutes to come up with a cool story, and you will present these then to me. I need to interrupt you for a short second. I will give you 2 more minutes to think about the stuff, but I need to tell you something about what you have to do in the lab later today. So, of course, we will just finish what we have started, but you will actually explore if this then that today. So, you will create a button device which triggers via an HTTP post an if this then that webhook. Yeah, so you will actually create on if this and that webhook in the developer mode, so you can actually trigger something in the internet with pressing the button. So we basically built the Amazon Dash button today in the lab. And then you can trigger from this webhook something happening somewhere else in the internet. So I don't know if tweeting still works because Twitter changed its API lately, but you will definitely be able to let your phone send a message when you install if this and that on the phone. You can trigger something happening on your phone. Or think about, you can also send something to Telegram or some other chat service instead if Twitter doesn't work. I want you to play with the I2C display. There's a 2-line display there, which looks like this here. So something like this. And so we show this to the camera too. There are other smaller displays which work with SPI, so if one of you feels challenged, we can also try to make that work, but I have some trouble to get the SPI displays working. And Then I want you to play with the one-wire interface, the DS11, which is kind of a little blue device with the grid on there. It's a temperature humidity controller, and it's in your kit. So you also want to see how you can connect to that one. So no remotely. So at least you should get the data out in a remote way. Maybe you need a little web server which kind of just shows the current temperature data. As homework, so you want to continue with your story skills you're just doing now. So of course you want to finish the lab work. So everything here, which is not optional, should have been done at home when we have the lab next time. You want to update your portfolios, so I can reflect on this because I will go through your portfolios next week, so to give you some hints if things are going into the right direction. And but I want you to come up as homework with two scenarios, two potential IoT scenarios where the parts could be commercialized. Yeah. So with this idea, basically, you want to go on Kickstarter with what you do there. Two ideas. Yeah. Come up with two ideas which are in the realm. You can also even reuse what you have done here, but some of this might go too far. So the home gateway, I think, is actually very hard to spec out. I think the little remote is easier, but you could also reuse the home gateway. That is fine. And the weather farm might be also very big, so you might just be talking about the part of it, like a weather station or so, might be something you could take as a possible commercializable product in there. And yeah, I want to see these then when I check the portfolios that you have thought about this as some of your teamwork in there. Okay, so that's the work today plus the homework. And then we have 2 more minutes and I will come to each of you individually and see how far you got. And the lecture is then after that over.